think it's this one.
Okay, we'll try it now.
It's me. Sorry.
Okay.
Is that better?
I think so.
Sorry
Okay,
about that.
how's this now? Much. Okay, better.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's call the Monday, November 27th, 2023 special town council meeting to order. Roll call shows Councilors Powers, Kenny, Berthasol, Laraway, myself, Councilor Wingard, our present in council chambers. Councilor Demerit is joining us remotely. Our first order of business is agenda review. I'd like to make a motion that, I cannot make a motion. I'd like to entertain a motion that we add the 3 items that are on our supplement to our agenda.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, move in a second. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote to add orders 23, 238, 239, and 240 to our agenda.
Councilor Powers,
In favor.
Councilor Kenny,
In favor.
Councilor Berthasell,
In favor.
Councilor Laraway,
In favor.
Councilor Demerit.
In favor?
Dan,
can you hear me? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Councilor Wingard.
In favor. So the motion passes 6 in favor, adding those 3 orders to our agenda. Next item of business is our workshop presentation on public safety building assessment report. There are guests from Sebago Technics. Robert, you're going to introduce us?
Owens is going to share his screen here with us. So good evening, Rob Yerxa, Orono Public Works Director. So as you are all aware, we've been working through process of a complete assessment of the public safety building. As part of that, Sebago Technics has been working with Allied Engineering and Grant Hayes Associates architectural firm to work through programming and a physical assessment of the building. The report is prepared that will basically outline the existing conditions. Our goal for tonight is to have a conversation about those existing conditions, answer any questions you might have about the report, talk about any more information that you'd like to see us gather, and then talk about next steps, which could include beginning to talk about that scenario building step that we've talked about in the past, where we begin to talk about potential solutions for some of the issues that we'll talk about tonight. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Owens McCullough, who's from Sebago Technics, to talk through the report.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening. Again, my name is Owens McCullough with Sebago Technics. We've, over the last several months, actually, we've taken a look at the building, been through the building, had a pretty much an all-day focus meeting with staff. And so we have a presentation of about 16 slides to just sort of walk you through the high-level findings. I don't want to read the whole report. Put everybody to sleep, right? So, but in the report's a lot of detailed information on the findings of that assessment. And then at the very end of that report is, we call it a level 1, level 2, level 3. It's nothing more than some thoughts to stimulate some conversation and dialogue for next steps. So I just want to introduce the project team. Of course, it was the town, Dan Merrill, who's here in the back, and several other folks from the fire and police joined us at an all-day meeting. And that's where we spent considerable time understanding how they work, how they operate, going through the building, a full evaluation of the building that provided all the data points to assemble the report. Grant Hayes Associates is the architect that went through the programming functions and codes analysis. And I'm going to explain programming real quick here. So programming is really sitting down with staff, touring what they had, how do they operate, how do they interact with each other, what sort of space do they have now, what sort of space do they need, how can we best get to what they need to function efficiently and effectively, and that's really the programming. Allied Engineering is my structural, mechanical, electrical, heating, plumbing, and ventilation. With me is Tony Davis. Davis, put your hands up. And Bryden Gardner, our electrical engineer, and everybody will have a moment to talk through the presentation. Just sort of to introduce you to what the focus of this was, as Rob indicated, was we did the programming study, understanding the space and the needs. We looked at the existing conditions, the physical state of the building. We did a code assessment of the building, and all of this information is sort of the first step in what do we do next. And it's really to help the town. Frankly, it helps us assist in making informed decisions for the future of the building. The public safety building, so just a quick overview. It's about 17,152 square feet, 2.5 stories. It's a steel wood frame superstructure, cast in place foundation. It's on an 11.43 acre parcel, kind of an odd shaped parcel. It kind of wraps around the RSU. The building was, well, there was a fire station there before, but there was a significant renovation completed in 1994, 1995, about 29 years ago. And as I was looking at the plans, I realized that I was involved in site and civil on that 3 decades ago. It's, like I said, steel and wood frame. The exterior walls are brick veneer, metal stud cavities. Those are the, instead of wood, metal studs. Roofs, wood trusses, steep profiles, hip roofs, standing seam metal roof. I think it was originally shingled, but it was switched out to metal roofing. The exterior elements are insulated steel doors, overhead doors, aluminum storefront entrances, hollow metal doors, all the things that you would typically see of a commercial type building. Utilities servicing the site are public water, sewer, natural gas, and underground electric. And the site plan, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the site, but apron on Main Street for 4 bays of the apparatus bays. Police is out back with parking along the building. There's a police impoundment, and it's all located right next to the town office. And I believe after the 1994, around 2000 or so, there was some renovations completed in the town office. That was a supplemental project. I'm going to ask Mike Hayes to come up. He's the project architect, and Mike's just going to take you through the current uses of the building, some of the programming, some of those efforts that were done. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Owens. Mike Hayes, architect, Grant Hayes Associates. What you have in front of you here is the existing conditions floor plans that we put into CAD for the purposes of the report. And as you well know, the building, the lower level toward what we'll call the back, facing the larger parking lot, primarily the police department, or wholly the police department. Am I good? I got to move that right there. Okay, how about that? How about that? Sophie said we're supposed to, no, never mind. So that's the police department, and the upper level is the fire department. Most of that is the apparatus bays, and then there are some support spaces around that. And then the very top level is, again, the fire department, bunk rooms, kitchen, day room, and the locker restrooms. So the police department down on the lowest level has the Sally Port. The generator is located there. Mostly offices for the patrol and the office people. The it's been reconfigured a little bit a couple of times in order to try to make more efficient use of the spaces. But there are still some significant issues down on that level. The fire department level has a mezzanine that is open to the apparatus bays, that has the mechanical, electrical. It also has the IT crammed in there and the fitness room. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Those are issues. And then as far as the bunk rooms go in the upper level, it's a little tight, but the locker rooms and restrooms do need to be addressed there. So, but this is the existing building. Make sure I got the right button, Owens. I don't want to mess this up. There we go. Look at that.
Yeah.
Okay. This slide is basically a table that tallies up all of the square footages that are associated with each department. So you've got on the left-hand side, fire department, the police department, the mezzanine level, common spaces, and the total gross square footages. And the first column to the right of that lists those individual square footages for the total of 17,440 for the entire building. The third column over is the needs assessment. So we went through and talked to each of the departments, talked to individual people within the departments, and came up with what is a list of their needs, which is in the report. And these square footages represent, if we were to address their needs as they are today and the future, these are the square footages that each of those departments should have. And then to the right of that, the last column shows you the delta or the amount undersized each of the existing departments are compared to what they need. From an overall building standpoint, the lowest, the last row, the building needs to grow about 35% in order to address all of the fire and police department needs. Next slide here just has representation of some pictures of certain areas, and we've identified the major areas that need some reconfiguration or expanding. There are some functions that are needed for the fire side that aren't presently accommodated with the space. They need some additional space for administrative assistant, special projects. Paramedicine office would be necessary also with the storage for items used there. Fire inspector does not have sufficient storage for all of the items they utilize. The existing conference and training room, based on the size of the staff, it really doesn't work well for police and fire to use it jointly. It should be a little bit larger to do that. The apparatus these days are getting larger, and the size of the bays don't quite match or help accommodate all of the apparatus. So hence you've got items that are outside. An additional bay sized to current apparatus size would be very helpful. There's a bunch of storage space that's undersized, and there's a lot of equipment and gear that's mixed together that really should be separated. So I need some storage rooms that would help separate those. There is a potential of adding 2 possible firefighters down the road. So bunk rooms for them would be good to consider. The restrooms, showers, and locker rooms presently don't. They're imbalanced as far as the square footage for male, female. So in order to be able to bring those both up to a balance, we'd like to be able to reconfigure that. And we can do that within the same footprint and just make them more balanced and useful. There's the kitchen, as though the kitchen does lack a little bit of storage. It's pretty good size, but when you look at adding a few other people, there's a little bit more storage that could be utilized there. There are some code upgrades that are needed. One is the fire alarm system, and Tony and Brian will get into that, but the alarm system doesn't have adequate coverage for sleeping facilities. And also there's a NFPA exhaust hood needed in the kitchen, and the one that's there now doesn't quite comply. So those are issues in the fire side. Here's a few more pictures of some of those areas we talked about in the fire side. And then on the police side, similar issues. There's administrative workspace. We can reconfigure some of the spaces in the building to address some of this, but there's also a shortage of space. Sergeant's area is fairly small, and that should be a little larger. There really isn't a debriefing room for the police. They do it in the break room. So really don't have a debriefing room, which is typically where, you know, the entire patrol gathers at the beginning of a shift, and there's a discussion there.
If I could interrupt just enough to say that, number one, whoever took those pictures make things look very big. And number two, no, that's okay. And number two, just to clarify, the break room is a closet that was knocked out to put the shelves in, so it's part of the hallway. So that's not actually a break room, just.
Correct. Yeah, it's a shelf on a wall that they stand and eat their lunch at if they're not at their desk. So thank you, Sophie. It's very, very tight down there. There isn't adequate evidence processing or an evidence storage room, and that's really critical to police function. The gear room, yeah, you know, they did a great job with the space they had, but it's just overflowing, and they really don't have adequate space for ammo, tactical gear. Those pieces really need to be stored separate from the general storage. They need a workspace for administrative liaison. They don't have that. And again, the same issue with the lockers, showers, restrooms, the gender equity, diversity piece needs to be balanced. And there are code issues down there also, and those are enumerated in the report. Some of the general items are, you've got a fitness room that's on an open mezzanine, that's part of an IT area, that's in a mechanical electrical room. Those are all code no-nos. The mechanical electrical room needs to be in a fire rated room by itself. IT really shouldn't be mixed with any other spaces. It's wide open to anybody to pick at. And the fitness room is considered an assembly type space. And it really shouldn't be open to the apparatus bays nor anything else. And these guys will get into the mechanical electrical issues there. The carport structure that we talked about, or we haven't talked about yet, but Owen's alluded to. It'd be nice to have the outside apparatus, particularly for the police, undercover. One of the things to think about there is a carport structure out in the parking lot where they can park the police cars underneath it. And it could be used for PVs for solar collection for energy also. Here's a few more pictures. And again, photos are generous, as Sophie had said. You can see that large one in the middle. Did a pretty good job, but there's still lots of stuff just in bags hanging all over the place that really need to be in adequate storage, secured. The Sallyport picture on the lower right, it's small, doesn't ventilate, mold. Let's see, lower left for you. Sorry, thank you. I saw you doing, yeah. So that's not ventilated well, and there are some mold issues down there. So that's pretty much the architectural portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Mike. So the next piece of the presentation is really to spend a little bit of time talking about the existing conditions of the building. And that's why I have Tony and Brian here. I'll talk briefly about the structural portion of the building. As you'll read the report, the structure of the building's in good condition. If you were to do renovations to the building, codes have changed over time, so you would need to address that at that time. But the building itself is in reasonable condition, so that's a good thing. But again, there was a little bit of a conversation in there that if you start to do modifications to the buildings, then you would need to address some of those. There is settlement in one area of the building. I'm not sure, we're not sure exactly why that settlement has occurred, other than I think it was in an area where there was some fill or soft soils in the original construction. Is that pretty accurate, Rob?
Yeah, under the stairwell.
Yeah. So with this, I'm going to let Tony Davis come up and talk through mechanical, electrical, things like that a little bit. And one thing to keep in mind as we talk through this is this building was built, renovated in 94 and 95. So at that time, energy goals, sustainability was much different than it is today. So strategies as you go to look at renovations to the buildings will want to be factored into this, any decisions down the road. I know everybody talks about electrification in buildings. We see that a lot now to move away from greenhouse gases. The building's got some very efficient boilers, but if you swapped it all out to electrification, that has other implications that Brian loves to talk about because it changes the electrical loads in the building, and then that requires modification. So there's things to think about as you look at sustainability goals, but we're really talking mostly about the existing conditions. But we have, separate from this, had conversations about sustainability and energy efficiency. So Tony, you're up.
Sure. Bring up some pictures.
Yeah. I wouldn't give him any words. I'm making him.
Thanks, Owens. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the mechanical, plumbing, and fire protection systems in the building, and then I'm going to introduce Brian Gardner, who'll talk about the electrical systems. So I'm going to try to stay at 30,000 feet above the earth here and not get too far down into the weeds, but certainly if you folks have questions and want more detail, I'm more than willing to talk in detail about those systems. I do want to talk a little bit about the condition of each of the systems and the code compliance for each of the systems and the functionality for each of the systems as we go through. So the fire protection in the building, it does have a dedicated NFPA 13 compliant fire sprinkler system throughout all areas of the building. It serves not only the occupied spaces, but also the cold attic space. And because it serves the cold attic space, it's what they call a dry pipe design system. In other words, all the piping's got air in it. It's not a wet system. It only becomes a wet system if the sprinkler head gets triggered by a flame. So it is routinely inspected as required by NFPA 13 and is code compliant for all intents and purposes. The downside to a dry pipe sprinkler system is they are more susceptible to corrosion and failure. A pipe that's fully full of water all the time will corrode less than a pipe full of air because of the condensation in the oxygen exposure. So that type of corrosion you don't necessarily see coming because it happens from the inside out, and it is a 30-year-old system, like a lot of the systems in the building. Mechanical systems, I'll start with the heating. So the heat is generated by a pair of boilers that are actually located in this building. Those boilers are less than 10 years old. They're in really good shape. They're natural gas fired boilers that are really high in efficiency. They operate at like 95 to 97% efficient. They pump hot water, not only through this building, but to the public safety building for heating, using a set of what's called smart pumps. And these pumps actually vary the speed as the demand changes. So again, a pretty energy efficient setup. Problem with that system is there's a pair of underground pipes that go from here to the public safety building to get the hot water over there for heating. And although we can't see those pipes because they're underground, we can see where they come up into the fire station, and they come up in a pit that's below grade. and there's a lot of corrosion. There's some fittings in there that are really rusty, and you know, those could fail at any time. And obviously that's your only source of heat in that building. So it's a single point of failure, I'll call that. You may hear that a few times tonight. As far as ventilation and air conditioning, well, to stay with heating, once the water gets into the facility, there's a radiant slab over there that provides the heat for the facility. There's tubing in the floor slabs, basically, that is controlled from space temperature sensors. So there's 4 zones. Basically, the apparatus bay gets a zone of heating. The upstairs bunk rooms gets a zone of heating. The downstairs admin gets a zone of heating, and the upstairs admin gets a zone of heating. There's 1 thermostat in each one of those zones. So basically, everybody has to live with what that thermostat's doing. Radiant floor systems work well in an open space like the apparatus bay because that space wants to be at one temperature all the time. It's one zone. It's a huge space with a lot of mass. And once that gets heated up, opening doors doesn't really affect the space temperature a lot. So it's a good, efficient system for that apparatus bay. It doesn't work as well in an office setting. And I say that because every office in that building has a little bit different exposure, maybe a different size window. The window faces in a different direction. There's a little less insulation in one than the other, more exterior wall in one than the other. So every zone has a little bit different heat load than the other zones. So when you only have 1 thermostat heating a dozen offices, obviously it's you know, everybody has to live with whoever's got the thermostat's preference. So, and we all know how that goes. We've all been in office buildings. Ventilation and cooling is provided by 4 air handling units in the building. And those were installed with the building construction. They're 30 years old. The published life expectancy on a unit like that is 15 to 20 years. So they have outlived their useful lives. That doesn't mean they're going to die and fail tomorrow morning. They could last another 5 years. Who knows? What it does mean is you're going to have to put more money into them on a routine basis. Parts are going to fail on those more often than if they were less than 15 or 20 years old. The other thing bad about those systems is they use a refrigerant that's no longer manufactured because of the environmental concerns. It's R22. You can still get that refrigerant, but it's expensive and it's difficult to come by. So they're not, I guess, in a sense, environmentally friendly. If there's a leak, yes.
Is it a closed system, or is that something that you're commonly adding coolant in?
No, it's definitely a closed system, but like any system, it's got soldered joints, and joints can fail. And if they fail, you know, you lose the refrigerant charge pretty quickly. You hope it never happens, but it certainly does happen. Like the radiant floor system, each of these 4 units has 1 thermostat that basically controls the air temperature that comes out of the ductwork in the ceiling. So whoever's got that thermostat is controlling how much cooling is in the building and really how much tempered ventilation air in the winter. And it's a single zone. So there's 1 thermostat. 1 unit serves the upstairs admin, 1 serves the downstairs admin, 1 serves just the dispatch room. And 1 serves the bunk rooms. So basically, again, one zone for each of those systems. And it's constant volume. It's not only single zone, but it's constant volume. So in other words, you can't change the volume of air based on the space conditions. So it's really difficult to control these systems. And walking through that building, it becomes evident in the summer, there's a lot of window-mounted air conditioning units, and there's a lot of space-mounted dehumidification units, particularly in the bunk rooms. So it becomes inefficient. Not only do you have these central furnaces running to maintain whoever's got the thermostat's comfort preferences, but now you're running all these other units because that person's comfort doesn't match everybody else's in the building, or the thermostat isn't located at the worst case exposure. Like I said, with heating, the cooling load's different no matter which space you're in. So from a functionality standpoint, it doesn't work real well. And that becomes pretty apparent when you see the window shakers and the dehumidification units in each of the rooms. The fitness room, Mike mentioned, there's no ventilation in there. which there wouldn't need to be ventilation for a mechanical space.
I got a picture.
Or an IT space, but as soon as you occupy that space and start using it for a function, an assembly, now you have to ventilate it by code. The apparatus bays have what they call a Plimo vent system. There's an exhaust fan with hoses that hook directly to the exhaust on the trucks. So if they run those trucks in the space to warm them up or while they're loading and getting ready to go out, they do hook the ventilation system to the exhaust. But code requires that in addition to that, you have what's called a general ventilation system as well. So typically what we do with those general ventilation systems is put them on carbon monoxide sensors so that they automatically come on if the carbon monoxide level rises. There's no such system in the apparatus bay right now. The Sally port, again, Mike Hayes already talked a little bit about that. There's no ventilation in the Sally port, and it's being used not only to bring vehicles in and out of, but to wash vehicles. And the lack of ventilation, as Mike said, is causing moisture issues, and there's visible mold in that space. Plumbing, again, it's like most of the mechanical, the plumbing, most of the plumbing systems are original to the building, so they're 30 years old. Fixtures are functional. They appear to have been maintained, you know, faucets and fixture trim appears to be well kept. But again, they're 30 years old. They're showing signs of dilapidation. We've got a couple areas where they don't comply with current ADA requirements. If we start touching the building now, we have to start looking at ADA, and we'd probably be into changing out some plumbing fixtures. The piping systems, there's already been some failures in the domestic water piping systems. Copper joints have started to corrode, as 30-year-old piping does. Obviously, as it gets older, it'll happen more frequently. And then the drainage systems, the Sally port really wasn't designed as a wash bay. So the floor drain in there just isn't adequate to keep up with the water. And that's adding to the moisture issues in that space. And then the showers, several of the drains where they seal to the shower pan have developed leaks over the years. So that's causing some leaks into other spaces. Like with the boilers though, the domestic hot water is generated by electric water heaters that are on the mezzanine. Those are recently replaced. Those are in good shape. So that part of it, that's the good news. So that's kind of mechanical, plumbing, and fire protection in a nutshell. I'll let Brian talk a little bit about the electrical, unless you folks have questions for me while I'm up here.
Just the general ventilation system. So that obviously wasn't code in 95 when this was built, or 90.
Codes have changed a lot since 95. So I'd have to look at what the original design intent was. If that space was originally designed just to back trucks in, shut them off, then start them up to drive them out, you don't necessarily need ventilation. But the fact that there's a Plimo vent system in there to connect to the exhaust tells me that they run in the space now. That may not have been the original design intent. And again, with the Sally port, if the intent was just to drive a vehicle in there, shut it off, and not start it again till you're going to drive it out, then you don't need ventilation. But certainly if it's being used as a wash bay, which it may not have been intended for originally, it wouldn't meet current codes for ventilation.
I've got a question too before we get to electrical, and I'm not sure if you're the right person for this question or if there's other expertise in the room, but in the report there was quite a bit about lateral load and the codes related to, you know, if there was an earthquake needing to secure kind of lateral walls. And I'm curious if that's in your jurisdiction or if we're going to hear more about that.
So it's Allied Engineering's jurisdiction. I don't have my structural engineer with me tonight, but I am familiar with his report, and Owen's kind of touched on it. As Owen said, the building is in pretty good shape electrically, but I think there were 3 issues that he found. That what we haven't talked about is that's a risk category 4 facility. So it has to stay in operation after a catastrophic event like an earthquake or a hurricane or whatever. Those facilities tend to be designed a lot more robust than current facilities, and codes have changed significantly since the BOCA codes that were enforced back in 95 when that building was built. So by current code requirements, you're absolutely right. There's a lateral support issue on the mezzanine. which would cause the building to twist in the event of a seismic event. There's several ways you could address that. You can address it with some X-bracing in the floor slab, some X-bracing in the walls, but basically you would have to try to take the twist out of that building, because if it twisted, obviously the mezzanine would fall to the floor. That would tend to put a Category 4 facility out of business pretty quickly. And then I think there was an issue. He found some beams on the exterior with exterior exposure where there was some rust showing. He recommended be sandblasted.
Great, that's helpful. And I guess just a little bit of a follow-up question. And, obviously in the event of major renovations, things that need to be brought up to code need to be brought up to code. But just in terms of any safety concerns in the here and now, are these codes kind of like designed to be pretty foolproof, like in the event that we were in California where there's more risk of earthquakes than we are? Or, how do you kind of parse that risk? The fact that you're not highlighting it makes me think that we shouldn't be immediately worried about our safety on this in the here and now. But while you're here, it was a question I had.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we all know how often we get earthquakes here in Maine. My structural engineer didn't seem real concerned that building was going to fall down anytime soon, but you're absolutely right. As soon as you start renovating, you start pulling these triggers, and modern codes see this stuff coming. They see the California events, and they know eventually maybe it's going to get here. And they know a lot more about geographic conditions than I'll ever admit to knowing. But ASCE 107 and IBC, the International Building Code, they are getting a lot more restrictive when it comes to seismic design and building stability, especially in Category 4 facilities.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I did have that as a question as well. I mean, it says that this 32 by 82 slab is not well secured. It seemed like fairly strong language to me. And I wonder, is that like it's kind of an estimate, or is that we're looking at how that was secured? And it definitely doesn't meet
the 3 upgrades that you do immediately. That slab, like I say, there's a lateral issue that he was concerned with. And again, I'm not a structural engineer,
but I mean, it seems like, and I know 30 years is 30 years, but it seems odd that an architect would design it so close to something that's already out of code to me. And I'm just curious. And I think there was some information included that I could not read at all. I don't know if anybody else could read it, but it was the language around that, I think. And it was just totally blurry to me. And I actually can read up close. So I think it was the print, not my eyes. But I would be interested to further understand all of that, and whether there's a definitive what we did for securing that just doesn't meet it, or we think that it doesn't meet it. And maybe it
doesn't meet what the current codes would require, for sure. Yeah, that's a no. It probably met what Boca required back in 1994.
Okay, thanks.
Again, Jim Curley and I, we had I had actually called him I had spoke to him about this particular issue, and his response to me was that the building is sound, it's functioning right now, but principally if you go down the road and you want to say, geez, does this meet code? Is the building consistent with code? Well, the answer is, which code? We have to go to the current code, and structural engineers like to be conservative and apply the most current codes, because that's where the technology has gone. That's where it's at. So it doesn't meet the current codes. And when I spoke with him, his response was, if you do renovations to the building, you really need to address this as part of renovations to the building.
And is there a kind of a triggering point for like the type of renovations you do? I mean, there's obviously a lot of the stuff is maintenance and whatnot, and that's not really renovation. So I'm curious if there's a pretty clear line of demarcation if you do
sure
X or X dollar, if it's dollars. I think I've heard in the past.
When Jim and I spoke, if you're doing anything that adds load, changes the building structure, modifies the structure, then yes, you would have to address this. If you're fixing plumbing, you likely wouldn't have to do that. But anything you're doing that changes loads, add loads, renovates the building, changes the structure, then you're going to need to make these changes.
Which is why this mezzanine should really be used. Yeah, a lot of weight up there that was designed.
Yeah, I don't think it was intended as an exercise room. Hopefully that helps. You're welcome.
Sorry, Brian. If I sit down, I know I'll have to.
So in a broader answer to your question of when does a certain level of construction trigger things, when you look at touching $50,000 or more is one of the thresholds for ADA. So if you do $50,000 or more worth of renovation or addition work, you are now looking at the entire building for ADA compliance in the 2010, which is the current version of ADAG that we are using. Also, you start triggering having to comply with the energy efficiency code. That's another piece. MUBEC, the main uniform building and energy code, encompasses the energy code and building code. So you now have to look at that. So there are certain pieces that trigger 30% of the value of the building. Once you go over that threshold, it pulls into other codes. So there's many different layers that contribute to which code gets dragged into and upgraded. So that will help you navigate through that.
What's sorry.
But those are the big ones.
What's the current assessment for what the building is worth?
I don't know what the current assessment of what the building is worth. Do we have a town? We do. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions other than that?
Do you know that number, the energy trigger off the top, or no? Is that just
No, well, as far as the energy code, anything you touch, they consider it new. So if you were to replace the windows, it has to meet today's energy code for a window.
the windows?
Yeah. If you were to build a new wall, replace an exterior portion of the wall, you got to meet today's energy code
I see.
for the R value and the U factors of that wall. So
Air exchange or something like that.
yeah,
All that.
anything. So there's two codes, the existing International Building Code, and that's for a building that's standing as it is. If code enforcement officer was to walk through the building at this point and review it, then they are going to write up any deficiencies based on the existing building code, which is far less strict than the new building code. So once you take that wall out and do other changes to a space, now it's all considered new. That has to meet new code, even though it's an existing building. Does that help?
And if you go over 30% or just anything?
Anything new. And then the 30% will trigger looking at the entire building. So if you touch a piece of the building, whatever you touch has to be new, meet new codes. Once you touch more than 30% of the building, it triggers looking at the entire building. And that's where the structural piece comes in and energy code and all the other pieces get piled on.
Thank you.
Brian Gardner.
Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, no worries.
We'll give you your moment.
That's all right. I'm usually the tail wagging the dog anyways. So I'm Brian Gardner, electrical engineer here with Allied. I took a look through the building with everyone, and I'm going to focus on a couple things. One would be power capacity. One would be standby power capacity, ability to operate in emergency mode. A little bit of energy and a little bit of code related items. The power capacity certainly ties into how, as was mentioned earlier, how electrified we want to make our HVAC system. building of this when it was of this type when it was built was not an air conditioned building per se, and had different ventilation requirements back then. To do this stuff now that we do with these buildings, and to stay carbon neutral or to reduce our carbon footprints, we absolutely have to increase electrical service sizes. This is a 600 amp service in this building, which is on the smaller side for a building like this. I would say the buildings I'm doing these days are starting at 800. I'm doing a police station in Augusta right now that's solely a police station. That's 1600 amp service, a 2-story police station. And a couple of fire stations are, I think one of them is 1200 amps. So this is on the smaller side, for that matter, for growing into that program. So I would look at what we're going to do, HVAC wise, what we're going to do as far as program. If we wanted to support more EV chargers, if that's something that wants to get introduced to here as we add those to the fleet, perhaps both fire and police, it will have an impact on the service. An EV charger for a type 2 charger is 7,000 watts alone just for one space, or for a type 3 charger, it's 50,000 watts. And that's going to add up rather quickly. Then we take that capacity now, and I'll dive into standby power capacity. We do have a generator that serves loads in this building, but the generator serves very specific loads. It serves one particular panel that is called an emergency panel. It doesn't necessarily serve every load in the building. So now you're limited to whatever is on that panel is going to be on standby power. The fire stations and police stations I'm doing these days are all completely 100% supported by a generator, so they can be fully functional, any load in the building at any time. What you can do, you can choose to put a smaller machine, a smaller generator on if you are looking at what your loads are doing, but you'll certainly size like your transfer switch and your power distribution system with the full capability of being supported by a generator. These guys have to operate in times when the rest of stuff is not quite working so well around us. So it's that reliability for that. And even still for, say, freeze protection as well. Granted, the building is served by heat from this building. This building has its own generator. I didn't look deeply enough into it to see if the heating system is on the generator here. I suppose it is. More than likely it is, but I didn't look at that. But there are other heating elements or pumps or fans that are in the building itself, the fire station, police station, that are not necessarily on the generator. So it's how much support do we have for the heating systems for freeze protection right now. Energy, with looking at energy, as was mentioned earlier, a lot of the energy codes have changed over time. We're looking at LED lighting everywhere. This building here currently has, as it would when it was built, fluorescent lighting. Fluorescent lighting is harder to buy the lamps nowadays. In fact, you almost can't buy them. But they're just not efficient. They're higher in maintenance. If you put in LED fixtures, you're not changing lamps. You're not replacing fixtures in our careers generally, because they're went over 10,000 hours for LED fixtures, no problem, easily. And the power consumption is dramatically different too. What we're also doing, we're also seeing that isn't applied here, is there's a lot of manual light switching here. You do want to have manual switching in your bunk rooms in certain specific locations, but you also want to augment the manual choices with automatic choices, either wall mounted or ceiling mounted vacancy sensors that is a manual on, and then it automatically turns off for you when you leave, which is a more common design to do. And then even in the corridors and the stairwells, there's no reason to run the lighting in the corridors or the stairwells at 100% output. What we're doing these days is running them at 50% output. And when folks walk down the corridor or walk into the stairwell, the sensors trigger that, detect the person walked in, and bumps the light up to 100%. Then when the people leave, it goes back down. So again, all on energy saving as far as your lighting. Energy saving can be significantly improved here, changing the LED, adding a few more sensor type approach to things. With code issues, with looking at some code issues, I had come through a couple places. The generator, for example, that's installed in the room at the end of the Sally Port is too thin to maintain the code required working clearance in front of the electrical gear in that room. So that wall probably shouldn't have been should have come out, I'd say another foot and a half to get the right code clearances around the gear. The transformer itself, the utility transformer outside, the pad mounted utility transformer, I believe the air conditioning unit perhaps was added later in the game after the transformer, but the air conditioning, ground mounted air conditioning unit is a little closer than utility companies prefer us to have them to their equipment. Generally with transformers of utilities, they want 5 feet on the side, 5 feet on the back, 10 feet in the front. So I think our side clearance is tight on that. Other things that we're looking at that we're doing these days in codes, as codes have improved since it was built too, is other safety issues for folks. Just about every circuit in the residential portion of the building where the firefighters live, the day rooms, the bunk rooms, all those circuits are supposed to be protected by arc fault circuit breakers. They're not now. They weren't required back when this was built, but they are required now. Additional GFI requirements have come up as code has progressed too, where we're required to put more GFI outlets in different locations than we would have been required to back then. So there is certainly review of the AFCI and GFCI type breakers and type receptacles that could be improved upon for the safety of the occupants. The other thing, safety-wise, in the bunk rooms as well, the fire alarm devices and notification devices that alert you, the horn strobes that alert you in places where you sleep are supposed to be 177 candela and it's supposed to have low frequency horns. They weren't required again back when this was built, but now they are. And it's more to be that penetrating sound and that penetrating candela rating to a sleeping occupant. Firefighters don't sleep well to begin with. Anyways, we're always having to jump up. So I think they take more cat naps than anything else. And I say we because I'm a firefighter myself, part-time when I'm not doing this. Those would probably be the areas that I think we touch on the most is program load, reliability and emergency power systems, energy reduction, and some of the life safety things. There are other items in the report, but I'm not going to go through all of it word by word. Those are the ones that came to mind as I walked through the space. And I'm happy to take any other questions you guys might have. All right.
And, I think you said 600 amp is low, relatively speaking, and that it depends on kind of what we end up doing.
Correct.
I would assume if we changed air handlers and all of that, they're going to be more efficient type systems than what we currently have.
Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
If we were to like change air handling systems and pumps or fans or whatever, I would think they're going to be more efficient. I would think our usage goes down because they're going to be more efficient than what we currently have.
If replacing one for one, but if we're adding ventilation requirements that weren't there years ago, if we're adding cooling requirements that weren't there in the original design, then no, we would increase the power load as a result of that. But if you had, if I had an air handler doing the job it was required to and another air handler doing it today, the newer ones should be a little bit more efficient. I agree with you.
Okay. And for like EV chargers, because we've done some around town, I assume the way we've done them is that they come in on their own meter and it doesn't even touch our power. It doesn't come into the panel, obviously, is how we've probably done it to date.
It kind of all depends on what you want to do with the EV chargers here. I would I would probably recommend not attaching them to the generator side of the load because it may be something. But however, if that is a police vehicle that is part of the fleet, we need that vehicle during power outage situations. So then it should be on the generator side.
Which is, I think, probably the case for why it shouldn't be an EV, but that's a different conversation, obviously. Yeah. And you mentioned the standby capacity. You didn't say what we have today. Is
we have a 45 kW machine today. And it is off the propane system. There's propane tanks in the backyard here. There's two of them. I think one serves one generator and the other tank serves the other generator. I think they're actually even both matching. I think both machines are 45 kW, if I recall.
And do you have a sense for what we have hooked into that emergency? You mentioned I think you maybe didn't know exactly what or something.
There's one panel one panel in the building that's transferred to generator. I have photographs of what I took photographs of the panel schedule. I don't recall at the moment what's being supported by it now completely. I could certainly get back to you.
So
on that.
Yep. But no real like problem with what we have, I assume, or you would have.
No, I mean, you're just limited. You know, when you lose power in the area, you're only going to be able to support what's on that generator, which is not all the building. And it may be an area that you need, like, let's say that, the training room that doubles as a war room in a way. You know, if we're trying to deal with an event, a situation, we might use that large training room to set up command in there. That may or may not be on generator. Their outlets around the room may not be on generator, or there may be only a couple outlets on generators. So at times when you really need it, you're hunting to figure out what's on generator and what's not, and what can I use in the building. That's why it's far better to have that generator just support everything. And then you don't have to go through that thinking process when you're in an emergency mode.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
All right.
I had one other question for Mike, and it really had to do with the facility space matrix that you included at the beginning of the report. And this may be in the more detailed information that's not in the summary report, but how do you generate those? Are those is there a national standard that we use, or is there industry specific best practices for police and fire or something like that?
Both of those.
Okay.
Yeah. There are industry standards based on function and number of occupants. So for like a debriefing room or patrol room, it's number of officers and items that are going to be in there as far as what it's being used for. There's a thing, there's a manual called Building Design Standards. It gets updated, but so there are certain guides that we use, and then you drill down to what are they actually going to have in there in addition to or minus that. And that helps us get to the sizes.
That's great. And is there, as the structure of our departments changes over time, certainly our departments have changed in size and scope in 30 years. Do the size estimates that you have provided for us accommodate change in the future, or are they just set to say, this is what you need today to be up to the size you're at now?
Right. So generally what we will do is we will add 10 or 15% to each one of those numbers as a buffer for future expansion or additional space. So that's built into the program, but also there are some functions that are in that program that aren't presently part of those departments. Not many, there's like 2, I think. Mm-hmm. So there are 2 spaces probably. There's one on the police side. I think there are 2 on the fire department side that are additional people that would be hired if you provide the space. That is a need, but not accommodated in the present square footage.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yep. I think one other point that I did not make is, and it's an important one, is the current elevator services 2 floors, does not service the bunk room floor. Because you are a public building, you're not exempt. And even though everybody on that floor is, quote, able-bodied, there are people that may need or could have access to that floor that aren't able-bodied. And that elevator, if you touch the building, the elevator will need to extend. I shouldn't say touch. If we cross one of those thresholds we talked about, we'd have to extend the elevator to that floor and service that floor. So.
Can I just ask, can you explain that to me? Because we just built a public safety building, a public works building that is a public building used for staff. Storage. Oh, got it. It's the difference of the use. Wow. Isn't that fun? Yeah. No, I'm talking about the bunk room, just because in order to be a member of staff, you have to be able to run upstairs, let alone manage to get up them.
Well, just think about a scenario where you have an injured firefighter who now is excluded from the 3rd floor because they can't use the stairs.
Okay.
Any of those circumstances, it's where ADAs go.
Just trying to save a little money.
Yeah, we're not cutting things yet.
No, we did consult with the fire marshal's office, who was in charge of overseeing the civil law of ADA, and that was a hard, nope, got to put the elevator up there, or you're not getting a permit. So.
Sophie and Rob, I just have a quick question for you guys. When was this building last renovated and was it brought up to code at that point?
95.
This one?
Oh, this one?
This one.
97?
It was in that same time frame.
96,
That went first. I
97.
think this was 98.
Okay. Because like
99.
I know that we've kicked around the idea, some of us have kicked around the idea of if there is space that needs to be done for like office, that kind of thing, that this building could be used. We could kick us out of here and we could use the new library space to do, like, you don't have to worry about this, Sophie, but the new library space as where we meet as a town council, and we can put in space for other people. But if we touch this building, then we have to do all the renovations to this one too.
Yeah, so you're slow down, boss.
Yes, I just want to put it out there
Yeah.
just as a thought. Oh, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I
about
appreciate the
what
creative
would
thinking
happen
that.
if something like that triggered.
Yeah, so I think we are ready. So first off, before we move into that conversation, I'm just curious if anyone has any more questions about the report. Is there any more information that counselors would be interested in us getting put together for you that describes the existing conditions and the situation that the
I would still be interested, if that's what those pages were that are all blurred, I'd be interested in those.
the plans.
Yeah.
Yep.
I saw that too.
We have those.
Okay.
We can provide those to council.
I could read them.
Took me a couple times. Like, no, it's not me.
Yeah, that was a scan of a scan of a scan, I think. So yeah.
And I guess from a more information perspective, I won't speak for council, but I would like to tour this facility. One of you mentioned, oh, what you guys all know.
Oh.
It's like, I was in that probably when my second grader went to the fire station is the last time I was in there as far as any kind of tour or looking at it. So I've seen the plans, I've seen all of your great photos and whatnot, but I think ultimately it would be good to walk through with this.
I think it would be a great idea.
What's that?
I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, I love that idea too. Let's do a tour.
Yeah, and then the other thing that would be helpful for me is possibly like the what the building's worth, and then just a very, very rough estimate of what would, like, when one of them was very good was like, if we do 30% of the building, we're going to have to update the whole building, that kind of trigger, so that we have an idea of when do we trigger doing the whole building when it's money wise, and then how much is the building worth, and at what percentage of money that we trigger the whole thing, just as we're planning. I'd like to have some sort of like trigger.
Yeah. So I don't want you to get too far ahead because
Yeah, we can.
we'll
work through that. That's part of the next steps will be understanding the direction town council wants to go, and building those renovation scenarios and investment levels will be part of that. Could be part of that next phase if that's the direction.
Sorry, yeah, I'm new to this all.
Yeah.
So
No, you're
thanks.
doing great.
Can I just answer one other question, Rob, before you go? So I've got two values on this building. One is the assessed value, which is a mass appraisal. So take it with a grain of salt because it's an exempt building, but $1,638,200. And the other is our MMA insured level, which they use Swift and they use formulas for, is 2.67, well, 2,677,398.
Thank you.
And that's just,
Yeah,
and that's non-content. So that's just the structures themselves.
that is just the structures. Understand that what MMA has on there for structures, I need to go back and talk to our public safety staff for contents, but a lot of those contents are actually insured as mobile equipment and vehicles.
Excellent.
So
Okay, thank you.
So before we move away from the report, I just kind of wanted to highlight a few things that, as somebody who needs to manage this building and maintain it, are really, and they've all been talked about, but I kind of wanted to, like, if I had 5 stars, these are the stars that I would give them. First one is, I really don't feel like the report characterizes the lack of space. It's kind of hard, and Sonia's suggestion for a tour would really help bring that to light. I mean, we're talking about janitor's closets that are used for evidence rooms, or in the back of a janitor's closet, there's a little door. You open that, and that's where the air handler is. And that's really what's happening. So space, no matter what level of investment we end up at, is going to be an issue, because even if we replace that air handler 1 for 1, it's probably not going to fit where it is right now. Every mechanical space, every occupied space in general is too small. And so a tour of the building, I think, would really kind of help bring that to light. From a function perspective, the mezzanine is one that really kind of, if there was one thing I could fix about that building, it is the way the mezzanine is being used. That was intended to be simply a storage area. Now it houses mechanical equipment. The hot water heaters are up there. Along the back wall, that's where all the power supply comes in. Breaker boxes are all along that wall. You don't see it in the picture there because that's where he's standing, but behind him is all the electrical systems. There's an IT rack that's just right there in the middle, that is critical to the IT infrastructure of the town of Orono. And if somebody spilled a coffee on it, we'd be in trouble. So that mezzanine is really an issue for me. The HVAC system, so the system itself is working. And like Tony pointed out, the boilers are great. They're very efficient. But there's just a lot of gaps. There's, just imagine if you looked at it in terms of lighting, it's like every other light in this room wasn't on, you'd have dark spots. You'd have places that aren't getting addressed. And that's really what the situation is with the HVAC system. It's too hot in the summer. It's too cold in the winter. The way the zones are laid out, you can't keep everybody happy. I can tell you that. So that is a constant frustration for us trying to maintain that system. Even though we've upgraded some of the controls so that we can monitor them, we still can't make room number 1 and room number 12 balance out. Just physically can't happen. So, better controls, better ventilation is really a priority for me. The generator is a concern. It's too small, and it's again, space issues. It works, but it's 30 years old. Sometimes you got to go in and prime the pump a little bit to get it going, and some things like that are an issue. So reliability is a concern for me there, and given the use of the building, should be a priority. We didn't talk a lot about it tonight, but the structural issue with the stairwell is a pretty significant concern. I mean, it's the stairwell, which is that box that you see off the side of the building, is literally separating from the building as the support underneath it settles. Now, it's only a few inches, but there's a gap in the wall upstairs that wide that we filled with spray foam to keep it there. It's not, I don't know that it's unsafe, and in 30 more years, it's going to settle a couple more inches maybe. So it's not like it's going to fall over tomorrow, but still a pretty significant issue that should be addressed. Mike mentioned the elevator. So that kind of ties into the overall ADA compliance of the building. There are a number of ADA issues that are fine given given the time that the building was constructed, but in today's world really should be addressed. And unfortunately, that does include adding a third floor elevator to be in compliance. And then the other part of this whole thing is that if we do start, the last thing that I'll mention that I wanted to highlight is there are, and those thresholds are very low when we start looking at making improvements. A lot of these other things are going to come into play and will be required to make those improvements. So managing this budget from small to medium is going to be a difficult task, because there'll be a number of things that, you know, if we replace the HVAC system, we're going to cross that threshold, and the HVAC system has to be fixed. So there isn't, an HVAC system is a $250,000 investment. So, you know, to me, that, just to bring that into perspective, there's not a lot of play here. It's going to be a major investment no matter what you do.
Would everyone's doing heat pumps. I'm curious why we haven't ever kind of considered that for that building.
We could, but it wouldn't solve any of the other issues.
But it would
replace the window units and be probably much more efficient. Right. And so electrification in this building, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, especially since we are part of the DeWitt solar field. So we get solar credits for using electricity. So there is some benefit there. But that would solve that one problem, the cooling of the upstairs, but it wouldn't address any of the other issues.
That just seems like it's been, and you said just, I don't know what you mean by upstairs, if that's just the sleeping quarters.
The bunk rooms.
Dorms.
Yeah.
I assumed that offices also had, I thought I've heard that offices are also unbalanced and all of that.
They are.
Yeah. So it would solve those issues too. Not just the bunk.
If you wanted to put a heat pump in each office.
Or multi-zone, or right, you can multi-zone.
But that would be something we can work through. And so, like I said, those are the highlights that I wanted to make on the report. I have a list. Homework is figuring out what the assessed value is, providing those plans, and trying to set up a tour for council to walk through the building.
So is our next job as council, Rob, to let you know if we want to go forward with the next phase of the project?
So now we can talk about what we want to do next. And so it sounds like council has appetite for starting to take a deeper dive into some more specific scenarios. So one scenario can be a very level 1 code specific, only fix what's broken kind of thing, which would be a lower level investment. A next level investment might be to take a look at a more significant renovation that installs new HVAC equipment. So level 1 comes with a list of things that we wouldn't be able to address. So it comes with, you know, all of the items that are identified in here. Some of those wouldn't be able to be fit into a budget on that scale. Level 2 could be something more significant, where we start talking about bringing the building all the way up to code, but maybe we stop short on space addition, something like that. I mean, we can look at 3 or 4 different scenarios, all the way up to the grand, you know, renovate the fire department for the fire department, renovate this building for police and code enforcement, do the addition to the library, move community services to there, renovate Keith Anderson for the town office. That would work.
Wait till that gets out.
That would work. And we could show you, you know, give you some numbers on what that investment level would be.
So, go ahead.
So tonight we are not telling you to look at one specific level of investment. We're asking you to go forward and start developing scenarios at various levels, so then we could.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at, just for perspective, if nothing else, at least 3, a low level, mid level, and high level investment. Maybe throw in a one on each end that we don't spend a lot of time on, but again, to gain perspective, so that you can see, okay, for a $2 million investment, let's say, we can meet all of these needs, but we're still here. Or 5 million, we meet all the needs, we meet all the space requirements, we meet all the codes, but we didn't do anything with town office or community services, that kind of thing. And then maybe take a look at, again, just for perspective, what something on that larger scale would look like, so that you can decide, all right, pros and cons. It's going to be all of that. The investment level will be very, the numbers are not easy. I think just we kind of worked through what we called at a level 2, that would bring everything up, meet the space requirements, code requirements. All of that's pushing $5 million. So, but we need to do more. We need to do more to kind of nail in those budgets and figure out exactly what we would do. So the next steps could be that I can work with Owens on a new scope to build those scenarios, bring that to you for approval, and then we would get to work on those scenarios.
So we have completed the scope that Owens had, that we had engaged Sebago for. So we're at the end of that assessment. And I do think that it would be important to kind of try to keep the momentum here, because there comes a timeliness with this information. So I would recommend that you consider giving staff some real clear direction about next steps if you want to take them. The other thing I would say, the police chief indicated to me that, to Councillor Kenny's question about the generator, that the police department has 0 electricity through the generator when the power is out. So it is only feeding the 2nd and 3rd floors, and only pieces of them.
Was that always the police? Were they always in the space that was never on backup?
Yep. Yep.
Seems
That
like a little
was
bit of a
just for a
miss.
little history lesson. That was a temporary place until council decided to build them a new police station.
What was a temporary place? Having police
Where they're
down
at
there?
now. Well, when they were renovating the building, they had one of those, temporary office, like the superintendent's office was.
Oh yeah.
That was their police department for a little while. Then they moved them in the bottom floor of the fire department temporarily, meaning like for a few years while they got things straightened out, and things never straightened out. So
Jeff or Sonia, can you guys hear me okay?
That's secondhand.
Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a helpful conversation, but a tough conversation to follow remotely. And I know Sarah wasn't able to join us as well. I'd caution us to not to go too far with a sense of council tonight until we're all in a room and have a chance to talk about it, maybe come up with some more questions and potentially take that tour. So I definitely think there's an opportunity to keep moving forward and learning more things, but I just don't want to get us, I'd caution us not to give a sense of council until we're all together and can really kind of come to terms and try and come up with where we are. So thank you.
Dan, do you have any objection to the idea of us asking Rob to go forward with the planning so that we can get a better understanding of what some of the options are?
No, I don't. I do think I do think that if the numbers involved are going to be something that is going to take some consideration within the other stuff that we're doing. I frankly liked the item he talked about the most about, using the space that we have, and moving things around to the extent that we can. But I think there's a lot to digest here tonight in terms of the thresholds and stuff like that. So, I mean, I do think it makes sense to plan. I don't think it makes sense to give anybody a sense that the council is ready to commit to, certain scenarios. And I definitely think Sarah's got to, we're going to make sure Sarah gets a chance to weigh in too.
Yeah, I was thinking sort of along similar lines. I certainly want to continue this conversation soon and would love, Council Chair, if you could make a mental note that it'd be great to have another workshop so that when all of us are present, we're able to talk again about this report. And I think it would be informative for that conversation if, Rob, you'd, be able to supply kind of some of what's in the back of your brain by way of some proposed possible scenarios to us. I don't think that I feel ready at tonight's conversation to say, go draft a scope of work to do more analyses. I think the next step for me feels like take a tour of the building and then talk to council. And then that seems like a pretty likely next step, but I think kind of that would be my order of operations personally.
So what I can do is to move things along, I'll talk with Owens. He can give us a proposal to what it would cost to generate, let's say, up to 5 scenarios. I could have that. Can you have that to me by the 11th? Yeah. So we could, I could have that ready for you to make a decision on whether you wanted to move forward with it or not. That way we're assigning dollars to what the tasks would be.
And maybe for those counselors who have not had the opportunity to look through the building, or walk through the building yet, we could do that before our meeting on the 11th.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I know Sophie just mentioned this concludes where we're at, I guess, with these folks. I assume that you could and would be available for a walkthrough and talk through what's in the report with our feet on the ground and looking at what you're talking about, if that's doable. That'd be appreciated.
You're asking that I bring them back on the 11th?
For when we do a tour, I'm asking that
that would be the 11th is what I'm trying to.
I thought you said you were going to have some. I thought you said doing a tour before the 11th. I thought was just said.
No, what I was thinking is like a half hour before the meeting on the 11th, we do a tour. Then we can talk about, do we want to move forward with developing the scenarios or not? We don't need them here for that. We could develop the scenarios and then have them back in a few months.
So I would be really careful because I know that Owens has done the town favors in the past, but coming back to Orono again is really not part of the scope of the original effort. And I think that Rob will be able to take you through because I think Rob was there when many of these things were pointed out. So I think you'll be able to draw conclusions between the two. I will say, just because I get to, that I do think you've got an awesome team here in Sebago, Hayes, Grant Hayes, and Allied. If you look at this report, it was clearly well thought out, very detailed, not pushing council in any particular direction. And I, for one, think that it's good information as you build your path forward. So I really want to thank Owens and his team because Rob, we kind of thrust facilities on Rob and he's doing an amazing job. And I just hope you understand that there's a lot that goes into bringing this to you. And I hope that you can find kind of a methodical way to move forward in a timely way.
Okay.
I appreciate that and that this is not part of it. So I guess I would I would still want to invite them to come if they want to. And I think there's value in them being there personally. But that's entirely apparently going to be your call. So. And I honestly, Rob, I don't know about a 30-minute tour and then come over. And I really think it would be better, one, to make sure we have enough time, and two, not run from a tour to come over to review those. That's my 2 cents. Like if we did it a day prior to when we're going to come in and talk about what the other options are, that's my gut. I'm not speaking for the rest of council, but that just felt rushed to me to say, we'll run through and take a peek and then come over. So I want to put that out there.
Maybe if you guys would be willing for me to sit down with Rob and Cornell when he comes on board and schedule a time, maybe even a daylight time, so we're not rushing against the dark. We don't have to schedule that and take our meeting time now to do that, but we'll commit to having a time that works for most counselors before our meeting on December 11th, so we can continue to have this conversation on December 11th, if that works for staff.
So you may try to set up a meeting before December 11th.
We will do our tour before December 11th so
Okay.
that we can have our meeting on December 11th.
I mean, just to be clear, I don't really have any problem with us sort of going with what Rob has initially suggested, meeting for like a half hour over there for a tour before. I'm not sure what the extra time in between a tour and our discussion would really give us, because we're going to discuss it right after we tour.
And just keep in mind, what I'm asking here is not to decide that you're going to spend $5 million or not. I'm asking you to allow me to continue to work through potential investment scenarios to help you make that decision months from now. So
I think that sounds great.
To decide to do right now. Is this project worth continuing on with? That's my question to council.
Yeah, and I think we have a plan now. We'll give opportunity for counselors who have not seen the building in person to do that. We'll have discussion time on December 11th to have this exact discussion about our steps preparing, whether council feels like we want to go forward and do that scenario planning. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. No further questions or comments for council. Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much for coming up.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
This evening.
Really appreciate the presentation today. Thank you all.
Really good work. Thank you.
I do want to, honestly, part of that tour, I do hope that I want to hear from staff about the space and the usage piece as much, which is all in here, but I think it's going to be helpful to actually hear from staff personally.
Okay. Great. Okay, next item on our, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is consent. If there are no alterations to the consent agenda, I'd entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's moved in second. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda? Yes. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda will need a roll call vote.
Councilor Powers,
In favor.
Councilor Penny,
In favor?
Councilor Berthasell,
In favor.
Councilor Laraway,
In favor.
Councilor Demerit,
In favor.
and Councilor Wingard.
In favor. And all councilors present are in favor. First
Jeff?
order of new businesses. Yes.
Hey, Jeff, sorry, point of, I don't know, personal something. I have to leave now for this work function that I can't possibly get out of. So I really appreciate all the work that went into the contracts that we just approved. And I want to thank everybody for that, and I apologize for having to sign off for the rest of the meeting.
Thanks for being able to join us, Dan.
Thank you. Bye.
First item of new business is order 23-230, order appointing a member and alternate to the Maine Municipal Association Legislative Policy Committee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. Motion is second. Any discussion? It's Sophie, this is you, right?
I don't know how much information you want on this. The town of Orono belongs to the Maine Municipal Association. With each legislative cycle, they elect 2 municipal officials from each Senate district to serve on the Legislative Policy Committee, which establishes the legislative platform for the association. In the past, prior to his leaving the board, Tom Perry always filled the seat as the LPC rep, and which was an election. And then he appointed me as the alternate. When he made the decision not to run again, Cheryl Robertson ran and was elected, and she appointed me as her alternate. When she got done in the summer, I simply stayed as the alternate in the position. Now that I am leaving, the council can appoint a member who then appoints the alternate, or you can name the alternate now, or you can let me know and we would throw it back to MMA to find some other entity to serve.
Seems like a bummer that Dan just jumped off. This seems like the kind of thing he might be interested in.
If it's the practice that the chair serves and then appoints an alternate, I mean, I have no desire to serve on more committees, but in expediency's sake, I mean, if that's the protocol, let's do that. And
so you would serve and maybe appoint Mitch? Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, we could. I mean, we can have that. Just I'm agnostic on that.
I'd be happy to have you represent us in this capacity, Jeff, as you're willing and able. Thanks for volunteering.
Okay. So,
and I also feel comfortable with you, thinking on it and appointing an alternate as makes sense in conversation with town staff and whomever.
Is this do we do a motion and approve or no?
Well, we have a motion to appoint a member.
Oh,
I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I would like to amend this motion to appoint Jeff Wingard as our member to the Maine Municipal Association Legislative Policy Committee, with his designee as alternate.
Second.
Okay. So do we need a separate motion to accept that? No. Okay.
I think the way the order was written simply allows you to read the names in.
Okay. Okay. So as Sonia has stated, can we do a vote, please?
Now we don't have to do roll call.
We do not have to do a roll call.
We had a first and a second on the floor.
Yep.
So we'll start with roll call.
No, because Dan's off. So all councilors are present.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
So all those in favor of the motion as read by Councilor Berthasell. And that passes unanimously of members in council chambers. 5-0. Yes. All right. Order 23-231. Order appointing delegate and associate delegate to the Maine Service Center Coalition. Need a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. Sophie.
So the town of Orono is a member of the Maine Service Center Coalition, which is a legislative advocacy group that is comprised of service center communities. This group was actually created in response to some issues that came before the MMA Legislative Policy Committee, and where rural communities kind of are weighted in that arena. They felt like service center issues were not getting MMA's full attention. And so this group was created. So this is a group that has fought for revenue sharing too, wants to continuously look at local option sales tax, stuff like that. So in the past, it has been the manager as the delegate and the assistant manager as the associate delegate. The current town manager has served as a member of the board of directors to this group, resigned as of December 1, 2023. So this is truly up to you how you want to fill this slot. It is during legislative session, it's a bi-weekly meeting, and the rest of the time, I think there's an annual meeting and an orientation meeting. So it's primarily focused during the legislative session, and they have been doing these ones hybrid.
Is this something that an interim town manager could fulfill, or is this something that requires a permanent staff member?
So how you use your interim town manager is up to you. With only 24 hours a week, I probably would not put them here. If you notice, I didn't make any recommendations for staff because I don't know in the interim what staff members are going to want to do this. When we look across the board at staff, other than the manager and the assistant manager, which is currently vacant, the next person that makes sense and is paying attention to legislative issues is your director of community development. At the same time, I don't want to overwhelm him.
Well, that's what I was thinking of, if Mitch would be willing, just and maybe it's probably not super critical, and I would, I guess, put the caveat in there that if he is willing and able, I would be interested in that. And if there is some point that he's not able to attend, that's, I think, partial involvement is better than no involvement. And if we have a name there, maybe we get correspondence and things like that too. So we say tapped in. That was where I was thinking. And Mitch is nodding his head as if he would be willing to do that. That's, I would like to.
Thank you, Mitch. It's appreciated. I think you will be a better contributor to that than I would volunteering. I don't know enough about operations to feel like I'm the right voice. So appreciate it.
And is it possible to leave the associate delegate to be announced?
I think it's possible for you just to not worry about the associate delegate.
Fantastic. Okay. Any further discussion on order 23-231? Okay, seeing none, we will take a vote. All those in favor of order appointing a delegate to the Maine Service Center Coalition, with thanks to Mitch Stone. And that passes unanimously 5-0.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you. Okay, order 23-232, order appointing Cornell Knight as interim town manager, personnel director, and purchasing agent. Need a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Seconded.
Okay. I think we have discussed this at various times in the past. Is there any further discussion on this order?
Just looking forward to bringing him on.
Yes, thank you. Okay, seeing none, let's call for a vote on order 23-232. All those in favor? And that passes 5-0 unanimously with all councilors present. Order 23-233, order authorizing the town manager to cast the town of Orono's ballot for municipal review committee director for a term expiring December 31st, 2026.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Race for the second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item?
When is the annual election?
The annual election is happening now. It ends December 5th.
It's ongoing. It's happening now.
That's why you're casting a ballot.
So just to clarify, is this something that you would plan to do before December 5th during your time here as town manager, or is this something that we would be appointing a subsequent town manager to do, or both?
So pursuant to the MRC rules, so the nominations were due long ago. pursuant to the MRC rules, as long as someone is a resident of the community, a resident of an MRC community, when they are elected, they can serve at the discretion of the board. So ultimately, if I were to resign, the board would appoint somebody to fill the space, the time, between now and the next. I can't remember. I think it's the next election. I don't think it would be for 3 whole years. I think it would be for whatever portion of the year.
So my understanding is if we approve this, even though Sophie won't be with us for very much longer, it preserves our seat at the MRC table.
And I think
So
you would be our
board-
voting member for some period of time as long as you resided within
or Orono or any other member community.
Yeah.
So understand, when I get elected, I don't represent the town of Orono. I represent all of the members. Anybody represents all of the members. I will tell you that the town of Orono, with the exception of Kathy Conlow's 6 years here, have had a seat on the board of directors and quickly became part of leadership of the MRC.
Yeah.
I think it is important, the voice that somebody from this community carries is one that is anti-landfilling, good environmental stewardship, not seeing this as a money-making endeavor for municipalities, but rather how to find long-term, sustainable, affordable, environmentally sound methods of disposing of waste. The town of Orono was a founding member of the Penobscot Valley Refuge District, PVRD, which was the entity that created the MRC. So I can't tell you how long I would serve.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you what would happen after I serve. I could tell you that I have strong feelings about what should happen. But ultimately it would be the will of the board should I leave an MRC community to fill the seat if I was elected. And that's the spiel I've given everybody who has called.
Okay.
Not this board, the MRC board.
No, not this board, because this isn't so as Bangor and Orono have a rich history of serving on the MRC. We are kind of two of the long-term seats. So I guess an argument could be made that we shouldn't be. I like to think that we give good balance. But yeah, I think that Orono's voice is important on that board.
Which theoretically and theoretically we're losing, right?
You're what?
We are losing a voice and a seat at the table. With you moving, correct?
I'm a resident of Orono.
Currently.
Yes, I am.
Right. But let's say 6 months down the road or whatever, however many months down the road, Orono is but that said, we're giving you the permission to cast a vote. You're on the ballot. It's going to be voted on. It's beyond anything we're controlling anyway. And it would be a matter of if the next person coming in wants to get engaged and wants to be involved and wants to try and get in management, that would have to happen that way anyway, right? So,
or maybe somebody who's already here, who's engaged and involved and a good.
It doesn't have to be the town manager.
It does not have to be the town manager.
okay.
I guess I don't have strong feelings about this. It seems to me as though the order seems good to me as written. Curious if anyone has reservations about it at this point. I mostly just wanted to understand what was happening.
So in the past, council's given me a name. If you would like to tell me who you want it to be, I would love that.
Oh, giving you a name to vote?
Yep, it's your ballot. I know what you're like, just have her vote. I don't want to just vote.
But don't you have, is there a list of people you can vote from, or can anybody be?
They're right in the
So,
right in the background. There are 4 people running.
okay, yeah, I see that. And that's why I'm confused, I guess, at where you're going with this, because I thought you were going one direction and now I don't. That name that I was thinking you were thinking of is not on this ballot.
That is right.
Okay, I don't want to obscure this anymore.
Can you read off the names? Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the ballot are Melissa Doan, town manager of the town of Bradley, who is an incumbent. Kevin Howell, town manager of Carmel, who is an incumbent. Paula Scott, who is the town manager of Hamden, who is not an incumbent and part of the host community to the entity that MRC owns 10% of at the processing plant. And I am on the ballot.
So my preference is authorizing our town manager to cast a vote for Sophia Wilson and to let the MRC board determine at some future point if a replacement needs to be made, who that replacement will be.
That's the plan. That sounds good, I guess.
Fine with that.
Okay. Any other questions or comment on that? No. All right. Well, maybe we should vote at this time on order 23-233. All those in favor of this order? Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So the order passes with 4 in favor and 1 abstaining.
And that abstention is
Councilor Bertheson. Thank you. Okay, moving on to order 23-234, order authorizing the town manager to execute an agreement extending the current contract with Isabel Oshley, doing business as IOV Community Planning and Consulting of Portland, Maine, from February 29, 2024 to June 30, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion and second. Any discussion on this, or Sophie?
I just want to say that the initial plan had been a stopgap to kind of look and see how it was going. October was her first official meeting. So she's done October and November with the planning board. I've watched both meetings. I think she's doing a great job. She's getting staff answers when they have answers. So I think it's working. My thought in extending this is twofold. Number one, it will align it with the fiscal year. Number two, it will allow your interim and your regular manager to get a sense of how it is working and make a decision on how to move forward. But I think it would be a mistake to just end in February, especially since that tends to be busy season for the planning board.
Any questions or discussion on this item? Okay. With none, we'll call for a vote on 23-234. All those in favor? That passes unanimously 5-0. Okay. Order 23-235. Order authorizing the town manager to execute an addendum to the town's current agreement with Down East Assessing and Real Estate Services of Lemoyne, Maine, that extends the term from June 30th, 2024 to June 30, 2025 at a cost of $89,000 for fiscal year 25 services. We need a motion.
So moved.
In a second.
Seconded.
Okay, motion in a second. Discussion,
So assessing services, although the contract is annual, the services really run with the bulk of the services from April to August. So we have an assessor that is trying to line up his commitment work for the 2024 commitment, which would be our FY25 commitment. He approached Mitch and I asking for an extension so that he had some security, that he's got work in the coming year. And he has kept his rate flat funded for FY 23 and 24. So he's asking for an increase of $7,000 as part of his request. And I will say I've had some conversation with Counselor Kenny, answering a few questions. One of the things that I will point out is that an assessor is a statutorily mandated position. And in order to fulfill the functions, you must be a certified Maine assessor. It's one of the few municipal positions that you must be certified in order to hold. So there are right now we're at a dearth of assessors and a lot of need. We've seen people struggle with that. And if we were normally going to go out to bid, this would be something that council should be telling us during the budget season for the coming year, not right before we're getting ready to go into the assessment season.
Yeah, I asked about this because it said right in the packet that we extended this last June. For me, I'd rather do this in the process of the budget cycle, to be honest. And we're 6 months into a 1-year contract. I just prefer for us to do this as part of the budget discussion, understanding there's a potential risk there that there's a dearth of people out there to do it. And so Sophie said nothing but good things. So there's not any issue with performance or anything along those lines, but I do think it's part of a budget process for me.
Okay, any other discussion on this item?
If we did sort of table this and discuss it as part of the budget process, does it leave us in a lurch with our assessing needs up until that point? You know, is this a situation where we're getting ahead of the curve, or so what wiggle room is there?
So I would say that if I were the consultant and you wanted to punt this until June, which is right in the middle of commitment season, and we're one of his larger clients, I would probably take that as a signal that I needed to look for other clients to fill in the work for my own security. But I'm not bringing this to you because I thought it was this grand thing. I brought it to you because he is concerned about the security of one of his and stability of one of his larger clients. And I get it. When management changes, you get this with some vendors. This just happens to be a vendor who is part of a really critical task. And we should be moving beyond 1-year commitments for this vendor. And if it's important to make these decisions within the June timeframe of the budget, then I would suggest moving forward, you think about putting him on just a January 1, December 31. So it hits in the middle of the downtime, because it doesn't seem your April to June work is significant. Yeah. And then to pick it up and put it back down is even more significant.
And this contract is through June, to June, which is it?
To June.
The current one.
Yep.
But we renewed in June last year. Did we extend?
So I don't think there was ever a question in anybody's mind that it would get renewed. And I think right now what you have is new leadership coming in, which creates kind of a wrinkle with people. And it's up to you whether and what you want to do with that. I'm not going to advocate one way or the other.
I don't really see a good reason to delay this to June. I mean, seems like a standard service that we need, and it provides some stability or assurance to a vendor that we do need. I don't know. I don't feel strongly enough to hold this up.
Agreed.
I think the $7,000 increase is over 3 years is more than reasonable, more than we've, or less than we've seen from other similar kinds of consultants and outside agents that we've hired. So. Matt, did you have any questions or concerns?
I'm comfortable with going forward with this to create that stability for the time being in this transition. So I think that that's fine with me. Although I agree with Kenny, with Leo, sorry, that if you want to like button this down in the future with this particular person, then going through next year with the idea of let's for like fiscal year 2026, let's think about how we want to do this from like a January to end of December, if you want to make sure that and then we're just kind of like budgeting in June for that next coming year, and just tell them you need to let us know what that next year your average cost is. So I don't think changing it now is where I'd want to go, but in the future, I think I agree with you.
The other thing that this doesn't do, and it's probably unlikely because we tried before, and to think that a new manager is going to come in here and actually be able to find someone and hire someone permanent. But the other thing that does is takes this out of the picture. So it's not an option if a new manager were to decide they want to do it differently for a year. Not the end of the world, and we know there's a dearth, so it's probably not likely something they're going to be able to accomplish, and it's not going to be a highest priority for someone coming in. But that's the other piece that I didn't like about it, is it takes that option off the table for someone new coming in.
Okay. Do we have any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing this, and hopefully we can build a better process into our next budget session or budget cycle. We should probably vote on order 23-235 at this time. Okay, all those in favor of 23-235? Okay, and that passes unanimously 5-0. Thank you. Order 23-236, order authorizing the town council chair and town manager to execute a collective bargaining agreement with the Maine Association of Police Orono unit for the period July 1, 2024 through July 30th, 2027. We need a motion.
So move.
Second.
We
have a motion and a second. Sophie, you wanna?
What's your house number?
19.
Okay.
Is it not my house?
So as we talked about with council previously, the Maine Association of Police Orono unit contacted me with a request to open up a minimal number of articles in hopes of renegotiating the contract that is set to expire June 30, 2024 now. So council agreed to that and gave me some general bargaining room. And what we have come to, which we talked about in executive session last week, is a 3-year contract. So expiring in June of 2027, June 30, 2027. It includes, we only are changing 2 articles within this contract. One is wages. The wage scale was a general adjustment to the wage scale, no other change, of an average of 14.8% across the board in year 1, 3.5%, and then we would fall back to CPIU Northeast, all cities. We use the December number for the previous year when we're budgeting so that we get the annual CPI. And we're going to use a floor of 3.5% in the second year of the contract and 3% in the third year of the contract. So what that means is if CPI is 4.2%, the CPI that they would get would be 4.2%. If it was 2.2%, it would be 3.5% or 3%. Does that? Okay. And then we agreed to continue to budget 12 union positions with a minimum of 3 patrol sergeants, and make reasonable efforts to maintain the staffing level. There is language that I provided to council as draft language that the union has accepted, has been reviewed by our attorney. It would allow for the union and management to get together if there were a major issue, to negotiate and get union approval to fall below that if we needed to. So at this point, we've reached tentative agreement, and the next step would be for the town council to ratify the contract and give the council chair and the town manager the authority to sign.
Okay. All right. Any questions or concerns regarding this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll call for a vote on order 23-236. All those in favor? Order passes unanimously 5-0.
So the only thing that I would add, although you have approved the order, the information that I provided you in background that is confidential would still remain confidential until it was ratified by the other side and we signed the agreement. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to order 23-237, order authorizing the direct transfer of $175,000 from undesignated fund balance to the fiscal year 24 fire department operating budget to fund approximately 3 months of scheduled overtime pursuant to a side letter between the town of Orono and IAFF Local 3106 to address unanticipated departmental vacancies.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or introduction?
I would just say that we are still working through the side letter. The union has not approved it. The language in this order is very specific so that the $175,000 could only be used if the side letter is signed off on and we move to scheduled overtime.
Okay. Any discussion?
No, but I would acknowledge the local, our local fireman union or fireman union. Is that right? I don't know. And their willingness to work with us. We're in kind of rough straits here with lack of personnel, and these guys or these people have stepped up and willing to make this adjustment. And so we're appreciative of that. I'm appreciative of that.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, we'll call for a vote on order 23-237. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously 5-0. Okay. Moving on to order 23-238, order confirming the appointment of Lori Carpenter and Jeffrey Lowe as General Assistance Fair Hearing Officers.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
So this is a role that eventually I think your town manager, permanent town manager will play. And perhaps Cornell will want to do something different. But in the interim, I thought it was important for you to have those people appointed so that you wouldn't get into trouble in the future.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Do we have many hearings in a year?
So I have been in Orono for 12.5 years, and I have done one fair hearing.
Cool. Thank you.
But it was recently and times are changing.
Right. Drew. Thanks.
Good. Any other concerns? Discussion? All right. Seeing none, call for a vote on order 23-238. All those in favor? passes unanimously 5-0. Okay, moving to order 23-239, order authorizing the town clerk to sign off-premises liquor licenses until such time as a full-time town manager is appointed.
So moved.
Second.
So many years ago, the town council authorized the town manager to sign off on off-premise liquor license. So these are entities that have valid liquor licenses issued from their respective communities, Orono or other communities that are coming in to do events, whatever they happen to be. The only time you need an off-premise license is if liquor is going to be served. So somebody would come in. I signed off on 4 today. Somebody comes in with their state application that sketches out what their setup is going to be, as long as it looks fine. And I've spent enough time with Dan over the last few years to understand what looks fine looks like. I'll sign off on it. If I have questions, we'll have Dan sit down with us and the code and life safety if it's that complicated. Shelley always, if it's not an Orono license that we have record of, Shelley contacts the community that they're in to make sure that they're in good standing, and then I sign off on it. I think it would make sense to simply allow the town clerk to do that in my absence. There are people who come in the day it needs to be in Augusta. So I don't think waiting is a good alternative.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, let's call for a vote on order 23-239. All those in favor? And this passes unanimously 5-0. Thank you. Moving to order 23-240, order authorizing the town manager to file a waiver of foreclosure for 2022 property tax lien filed at the Penobscot Registry of Deeds against the following for outstanding taxes, interest, and costs. And those 2 liens are identified in our background information. We need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So motion and a second.
So it would be important for you to know why I'm asking you to foreclose, because the finding that you make when you do a waiver of foreclosure is that it's not in the best interest of the town to foreclose on these parcels. These happen to be 2 mobile homes on rented lots. It is the town's policy to try very hard not to foreclose on these. Oftentimes it's a matter of just getting a homestead exemption. But these came up, and the only way to stop the automatic foreclosure, which then we assume costs associated with lot rent or evicting and moving, and it's just not in our best interest. We are not waiving the debt. The debt is still there. We just can't foreclose on it.
Okay, good. Any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll call for a vote on order 23-240. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously 5-0. Thank you. That closes out our new business. Council chair and town manager reports. There are 2 items for council chair report. Councilor Powers is going to cover the first.
I seem to have lost it, but I think I remember everything on this. So we just wanted to invite everybody to the potluck this coming Sunday, the 3rd. It starts at 4:30 and it'll be at the Keith Anderson building. We had a wonderful time last potluck, so come and join us and let's have a great time.
Thank you. The other item for council chair reports is that this is our last meeting with our longstanding town manager. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that. Thank Sophie for all the work, wisdom, and guidance she's offered us for more than a decade. And say that we'll miss her and the help she's given us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I would echo that as well. coming in with all of my own opinions. It's been helpful. It's been a learning experience, and you've definitely taught a lot. So much appreciated.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. And town manager report.
Can I ask for the town manager report? If you could mention, if there's a Mill Street property, I thought there was bids in October and stuff, and I haven't.
We didn't get any bids for it, so none.
No bids for it?
None. So we've kind of got to put it back out, but I thought I would let that be somebody else's issue.
Totally fair.
Was there a minimum?
I don't believe there was a minimum.
Wow. Give it away.
Town manager report. To be honest, I have none. I'm working through a smooth transition. I guess my final report would be to say how much I've enjoyed working for the town of Orono and the incredible staff, many of whom are sitting back there right now. They are absolutely incredible, and you are very lucky to have such professional, capable people serving this community.
Thank you. All right. Any public comment? Do we have any public? No. Do we have any public comment online?
No hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no public comment, I take a motion to adjourn.
Can I just,
Oh, wait.
we do have a part of a town manager's report that bubbled up today, which is, if y'all would remember Blake Court, the entity on Stillwater Avenue that did the massive clear cut of a forested wetland. Our code enforcement officer went out today to do the third inspection for a certificate of occupancy, which is required before people can move in, to find that 3 units were in fact rented and habitated. So I'm going to try to work a plan through that before I leave. But our code officer has, I think, is getting a little frustrated that he's trying to find resolution and it's really slipping away from him. So just want to make you aware of that, because that might pop.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we have no other business. We have no public comment. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
A motion.
Second.
All those in favor? And we are adjourned 5-0. Thank you very much.